Hello and welcome to Virtual Education Library. In today's video, we will discuss Bloom's taxonomy, which is a framework used to categorize different levels of learning. Bloom's taxonomy is a widely used tool for educators to design lesson plans, assessments, and evaluate students' progress. Let's dive in and learn more about it. Bloom's taxonomy is a hierarchical classification of educational objectives created by Benjamin Bloom, who was an educational psychologist. The framework is divided into 6 levels, each representing a different level of cognitive complexity. Bloom's taxonomy is a framework used to categorize different levels of learning from basic recall of information to complex synthesis and creation of new knowledge. It is widely used by educators to design lesson plan, assessment, and evaluate student progress. So let's first know a brief history of Bloom's taxonomy. It was developed by Benjamin Bloom, who was an educational psychologist, and his colleagues in the 1950s. The initial purpose of the taxonomy was to provide a framework for teachers to evaluate the quality of educational objectives and assessments. The first version of the taxonomy was published in 1956 and consisted of 3 domains: the cognitive, affective, and psychomotor domains. The cognitive domain, which is the most well-known and widely used domain, was further divided into 6 levels of learning, which were knowledge, comprehension, application, analysis, synthesis, and evolution. In 2001, a revised version of the taxonomy was published by Bloom's former student Lauren Anderson and a group of other educational psychologists. The revised version included changes to the language and structure of the levels, but the core concepts remained the same. The revised taxonomy included the following 6 levels of learning: remembering, understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, and creating. These levels were presented in a pyramid structure with remembering at the base, and creating at the top. This structure reflects the idea that the higher levels of learning are built on the lower levels of learning. Since its development, Bloom's taxonomy has become one of the most widely used educational frameworks. It has been used to design curriculum, assessment, and lesson plans across a wide range of subjects and educational levels. It has also been adapted and expanded for use in other domains such as technology and social emotional learning. But first, see what does each level of learning mean. Remembering, the first level is remembering, which involves recalling information such as facts or definition. For example, a student might recall the capital of a state or a math formula. The second level is understanding, which involves comprehending information by interpreting it and putting it into context. This can involve explaining or summarizing a concept. The third level is applying, which involves using knowledge and skill to solve problems or complete tasks. This can involve using formulas to calculate a result or reapplying a concept to a real-world situation. The fourth level is analyzing, which involves breaking down information into parts and examining how those parts relate to each other. This can involve identifying patterns, relationships, or causes and effect. The fifth level is evaluating, which involves making judgments about the value or quality of information or ideas. This can involve critiquing an argument or evaluating the effectiveness of a solution. The sixth and final level is creating, which involves using existing knowledge and skills to create something new or original. This can involve designing a project, developing a new idea, or creating a product. Analysis of Bloom's taxonomy. The framework is divided into 6 levels, each representing a different level of cognitive complexity. The first 2 levels, remembering and understanding, are focused on recalling information and comprehending it in a meaningful way. These levels provide the foundation for higher order thinking skills and are essential for building more complex skills. The next 2 levels, applying and analyzing, involve using knowledge and skills to solve problems and analyze information. These levels require students to demonstrate their ability to use critical thinking and problem-solving skills in real-world situations. The final 2 levels, evaluating and creating, involve making judgments about the value or quality of information and creating new knowledge. These are the most complex and require students to use higher order thinking skills to synthesize and create new knowledge. Bloom's taxonomy is a valuable tool for educators because it provides a clear and systematic way to evaluate student learning and design effective lesson plans and assessment. By using the different levels of these Bloom's taxonomy, teachers can ensure that they are challenging their students and providing opportunities for them to develop higher order thinking skills. So now the question is how Bloom's taxonomy is helpful. Bloom's taxonomy is helpful for educators and learners alike for several reasons. The first is that it provides a clear and structured framework for understanding and evaluating different levels of learning. This helps educators design lesson plan, assessment, and learning objectives that are aligned with the specific level of learning they want their student to achieve. Bloom's taxonomy is structured in a way that encourages higher order thinking. The higher levels of the taxonomy require learners to engage in critical thinking, problem solving, and creativity, which are essential skills for success in both academic and real world settings. The taxonomy is designed to promote active learning by encouraging learners to engage in a variety of activities that require them to apply their knowledge and skills in a meaningful ways. Bloom's taxonomy is a valuable tool for assessment. It provides a clear and structured way to evaluate students' learning and progress, allowing educators to assess whether students are achieving the desired learning outcomes or not. It is a flexible framework that can be adapted to a wide range of educational settings and subjects. It can be used to design lessons and assessment for learners of all ages and abilities. How a teacher or educator can use Bloom's taxonomy. So Bloom's taxonomy can be used in several ways to enhance teaching and learning. Here are some steps for using Bloom's taxonomy in the classroom. The first step is to determine the learning objectives. Begin by determining the learning objectives for the lesson or unit you are designing. These objectives should be specific and measurable. These should be SMART and they should align with the desired level of learning. Once you have identified the learning objectives, identify the level of learning required to achieve them. This can be done by consulting the levels of Bloom's taxonomy and selecting the appropriate level for each objective. Design learning activities that align with the level of learning required to achieve objectives. Activities should be varied and should engage students in different types of thinking such as recall, analysis, evaluation, and creation. Assess students' learning using a variety of assessment methods that align with the level of learning required to achieve the objectives. Assessment methods can include quizzes, essays, projects, and presentations. Provide feedback to students that help them understand their strengths and weaknesses and identify areas where they can improve their learning. Finally, reflect on the process. Reflect on the process by using Bloom's taxonomy in your teaching and make adjustment as needed. This can include adjusting learning objectives, revising learning activities, and modifying assessment methods. By using Bloom's taxonomy in this way, teachers can ensure that they are designing lessons that engage students in meaningful learning experiences and that promote higher order thinking skills. This can lead to improved student outcomes and a deeper understanding of the subject matter. Here are some examples of objectives, instruction, and assessment based on Bloom's taxonomy. These are just a few examples of how Bloom's taxonomy can be used to design objectives, instructions, and assessment in math, English, and science. By aligning these elements with Bloom's taxonomy, teacher can ensure that they are engaging students in a meaningful learning experiences and promote higher order thinking and deeper understanding of the subject matter. So, first math, the learning objective could be students will be able to apply the Pythagorean theorem to solve problems, and instruction could be provide students with a real world problem that requires them to use the Pythagorean theorem to find the missing side of a right triangle, encourage them to work collaboratively and use manipulatives to help visualize the problem. And assessment of these instructions can be done by asking students to create their own real-world problem that requires the use of the Pythagorean theorem, have them present their problem and their solutions to the class. Another example of English is that the learning objective could be students will be able to analyze the themes of a literary work. Instructions could be assign students a literary work and have them identify the themes present in the work. Ask them to provide evidence from the text to support their analysis, and the assessment can be done by asking students to write a literary analysis essay that analyzes the theme of the work. This essay should include a thesis statement, evidence from the text, and a conclusion that synthesizes their analysis. In the context of science, learning objective could be students will be able to design and conduct an experiment to test a hypothesis. Instructions could be assign students a hypothesis and have them design an experiment to test the hypothesis. Encourage them to consider variables, control groups, and the scientific methods. And assessment could be done by having the students conduct the experiment and report their results in a lab uh, lab report. The report should include a hypothesis, a description of the experimental design, data tables and graphs, and a conclusion that interprets the results. So while Bloom's taxonomy is a useful framework for designing instruction and assessing learning, there are also some potential pitfalls or disadvantages to be aware of. In some cases, teachers may rely too heavily on lower order thinking skills such as recall and comprehension rather than emphasizing higher order thinking skills such as analysis, evaluation, and creation. This can limit the depth of learning and may not prepare students for complex real world problem solving. Hence, over reliance on lower order thinking is a problem. Difficulty in measuring higher order thinking. Assessing higher order thinking skills can be challenging as they often involve more complex processes that are difficult to measure using traditional methods, assessment methods. This can make it difficult to accurately measure the effectiveness of instructions. Limited applicability to some subjects. While Bloom's taxonomy can be applied to a wide range of subjects, some subjects may not lend themselves as readily to the framework. For example, creative writing or artistic expressions may be difficult to categorize using the framework. Risk of oversimplification. Bloom's taxonomy provides a simplified model of cognitive processes, and there is a risk of oversimplifying the complexity of learning and thinking. This can lead to a reductionist approach to teaching and learning, which may not fully capture the complexity of the learning process. Inadequate attention to affective domain. Bloom's taxonomy focuses primarily on cognitive processes and may not adequately address the affective domain, which includes attitudes, values, and beliefs. Ignoring the affective domain can limit the depth and effectiveness of instruction. While Bloom's taxonomy can be a useful framework for designing instruction and assessing learning, it is important to be aware of its limitations and potential pitfalls to ensure that it is used effectively and appropriately. Is anything which is better than Bloom's taxonomy? So, Bloom's taxonomy is a widely used framework for designing instruction and assessing learning, but it is not the only approach to doing so. There are other models and frameworks that have been developed which with its own strength and weakness. One alternative to Bloom's taxonomy is the solo taxonomy, which stands for Structure of Observed Learning Outcomes, which emphasizes the development of more complex levels of uh, understanding through a hierarchical framework. Solo taxonomy categorizes learning outcomes based on the level of complexity, ranging from pre-structural, no understanding to extended abstract deep understanding and ability to apply concepts in new context. Another alternative is the 4Cs model of learning, which emphasizes the development of 21st century skills, which are critical thinking, creative thinking, communicating, and collaborative. The 4Cs model focuses on the application of skills and knowledge to real world problems rather than simply memorizing and recalling. Ultimately, the best approach to designing instruction and assessing learning will depend on the specific need and goals of the learners and subject matter being taught. Different models and frameworks can be useful in different contexts, and it may be helpful to use multiple frameworks in combination to achieve a more comprehensive approach to teaching and learning. By understanding the 6 levels of Bloom's taxonomy, teachers can design learning experiences that cater to different levels of cognitive complexity, ensuring that students are challenged and engaged in their learning. So, the next time you are designing a lesson or assessment, remember Bloom's taxonomy and use it to create an effective and meaningful learning experiences. If you like this video and want to watch more like this, please like, share and subscribe Virtual Education Library. Thank you.